Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. When you get to the month of June, you think, well, this is kind of the middle of the summer, but actually you're getting very near the end of the time you can spray things like XtendiMax or Ingenia, Liberty, Roundup in your soybeans. We'll talk about those last days to spray on today's show.
We also want to talk about how, even though it might seem like it's getting a little bit late, there's still lots of potential in your crops. But how do you evaluate your late season nutrient needs, whether you have corn, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, or a number of crops? We'll talk about that today.
Now, one other thing in the later season is our weed of the week is pretty unpleasant to be around. We'll show you how to get it out of your fields and lawn on today's program. But first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
How do farmers reduce erosion? Let me just first say this. If you compare today versus 100 years ago, there isn't really even a comparison. Farmers have reduced erosion so dramatically on the farm. They're holding soil in place where soil used to blow around, used to wash around. There's been a dramatic change on the farm. We want to talk today about why.
I remember back just a few years back when my grandpa was still alive, we were doing a field day on the farm and we had dug some root pits. And my grandpa literally started weeping. And I said, oh no, I worked my grandpa too hard. He's kind of an old man and I made him walk too much. And he goes, no, Darren, I'm fine. I'm fine physically. He goes, I just feel bad that back when I was farming way back in the 30s and 40s, we did so much tillage that some of the ground has moved and now you're left to pick up the pieces. And you know, this is where a big difference has been made with the equipment that we have and the farming practices we're using.
All right, the way I look at this thing, there are three main reasons why erosion has been reduced. Number one is reduced tillage or no-till. Number two is tile. And number three is continuous crop, or put it another way, even if we're raising corn or soybeans, having some type of cover crop out there during the other months out of the year.
So let me hit that tillage point once again. So my grandpa talked about the only way they could kill weeds on their farm besides hand pulling them was doing tillage. And when you had something like grass coming, tillage was the best thing they could do. So they had to do all this extra tillage. Now we don't have to do that anymore because we've got herbicides.
It's not just that, it's also we have much better equipment to plant in, to just do field operations. So we don't have to use that tillage in that same way. We can put fertilizer on, we can plant into no-till.
All right, the other thing is, yes, nature is great and there's rolling hills and all this, but what happens with water? When it rains a lot, water cuts a new path.
Yep.
You see it with rivers all the time. They're constantly moving.
Yep.
It was the same thing out in fields, and farmers really didn't want to see that happen with their farm ground. So farmers have done some different things in the field with subsurface drain tile to help water move out of the field. That way, when we've got that water table down lower, anytime we get a rain, more of it can soak into the ground instead of having to run off the surface. The other thing along these lines to help with drainage has been grass waterways. So farmers took fields that were completely tilled and put some grass waterways in through the valleys where there's heavy water movement, and that protected the soil as well.
Yeah, and just cover crop in general, or any type of crop. So if you have water, it doesn't immediately hit the ground, it lands on crop first. Not only do the crop roots hold that soil in place, but the crop leaves slow that water flow down. So instead of hitting the ground hard, it hits the ground much softer. So if a farmer can have crop growing more months out of the year, then that seems to be a real good thing in terms of reducing erosion as well.
Well, once again, there has been a dramatic reduction in soil erosion over the past 100 years, certainly over the last generation with some of the different farming techniques and equipment that are being used. One other thing farmers use equipment for is stopping weeds like our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how later in the show.
When there's work to be done on your farm, you can't afford to be grounded. Whether for repair or upgrade, you need quality new, used, and rebuilt parts fast. Worthington Ag Parts has what you need, and our distribution network offers same-day service to much of the country. And with 15% off all parts ordered in July, now's a great time to get to know us. Worthington Ag Parts, providing quality parts at quality prices and adding value to your farm operations for over 50 years.
Avoid the V-shaped pattern of injury caused by chemical buildup in your booms. The Express End Cap from Hypro eliminates the dead ends that lead to herbicide buildup and provides easy access to your booms, giving a complete flush between applications. Hypro, helping you spray better.
So far, looking behind the machine, I'm thoroughly impressed with them. Compared to the older concaves we were running, we were finding about 40 grains, and we put these new ones in it, and it's hard to find one.
After the break, I found out about these concaves. While we were down, we put these concaves in, and it was like a different machine. I'd say we probably saved 3 to 5 bushels to the acre. I probably tripled my money just by putting these in.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
There are micronutrients throughout the league, Joe, but let's take a look at Micro 500.
Yeah, the synergy of the micronutrients in this guy have raised the bar on the field. Those others are just wannabe Micro 500s.
So you think this is the player you'd want on your team?
You bet, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, Micro 500 always has a place on the field.
Okay. You can check out Micro 500 stats at agroliquid.com.
Introducing the SOILMAX ZD48, the newest addition to the SOILMAX Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SOILMAX ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
If you're shooting for top production in your crops, you need to feed that crop all through the season. Too often our nutrient programs focus on the early part of the year and don't focus enough on the late part of the year. So we're going to talk about evaluating your crop for its nutrient needs late in the season.
One of the most important things you can do every year in every crop is some plant tissue analysis work. You need some data if you're going to make better decisions in terms of fertility. We want to find out, is the fertility that's in your soil getting into your plant? Do you have enough fertility coming up into your plant? Are you getting to the critical levels you need to get to achieve top yields? Without that data, you're not going to know. So what we suggest you do is tissue sample every week from the same spots in your field. If nothing else, let's say you've never done this before, we just want you to take at least a couple spots in maybe a couple different fields. Sample those spots separately all season long, at least for 8 to 12 consecutive weeks. Pick the same day and the same time of day each week. So on our farm, that's 8 a.m. every Monday morning. We run out, pull tissue samples. That way we've got a database going 7 days apart every single week through the season, and we can see the highs and lows. We can see if, oh boy, we're always low on potassium, or we're always high on this nutrient or something like that. And then we can start making adjustments both for this year and also for next year.
If you want to get the most data out of these tissue samples, we would also suggest using soil sampling right in those same spots so you know what's in the soil and what's getting into the plant. We'd also like to see yield maps. Now, if you've got yield maps going back several years, this will help you identify where the spots are to begin with, that you may say, you know, this area's been a problem spot for 5 years for me, let's figure it out this year. And if you got yield data, soils data, plant tissue data, you're gonna be a long ways towards diagnosing what your challenge is in that spot and how you can best improve your yields.
Now, the other thing is field evaluation itself. Let me put it to you this way though. If you're seeing visual issues, whether it's firing on the lower leaves, you see some yellowing on the upper leaves, whatever it is, you've already lost yield. So to go in and fix something for this year, yes, you can help it, but you can never recover the yield that you've already lost. We want this data before you see a visual issue. When you have a plant that's starting to run a little bit low on nitrogen, it'll show up on that tissue test first before you visually see, uh-oh, now my corn is yellow. That's what I'm getting at here. Then we've got a much better chance to help save our yield this year. But if nothing else, if you say, well, boy, I haven't done tissue tests, but I'm already out in my field and it looks yellow, it just looks terrible. All right, well, now do tissue tests, now do soil tests. Let's figure this out at least for next year.
A couple other points that I've got. With plant tissue testing, Brian made the comment of do it 8 to 12 consecutive weeks out in a certain part in your field. The point is, if you stay with a consistent program, you can start to see trends. Let's just take, for example, this week it doesn't rain. We go out and pull plant tissue tests and it says I'm short in quite a few things. Then next week we get a rain and all of a sudden it flushes a whole bunch of nutrients into our crop and it says, oh, nutrient levels are good on everything. Well, if you just had those two tests, you'd be really confused, right? Or if you only had one of those tests, you may overreact and think, well, I'm short in something, but in all reality, it may just not have rained for a while. So when you do it over a period of weeks, you can sort that out really quickly. The other point I was going to make is if you're using tissue sampling to change things right now, let's just say it's a real critical time in your plant's life, you just reached the reproductive stages. Yes, you can do it. You can say, wow, I am short in boron in my corn. I'm going to address it this year. Great. Just make sure you work with your agronomist to find sources that are going to get right into the plant as quickly as possible. So we're normally talking about chelated products to try to get into the plant without being tied up.
One of the comments Darren just made that I want to hit on a little bit more is he said, well, if you got rain, you'd have more nutrients flush in. I don't want you to use rain as an excuse. In other words, what I'm saying is if you're in a dry area of the country like we are, and sure, if I got a 3-inch rain in the middle of the growing season, which almost never happens, it looks like I have more nutrients available. Realistically, you have to have higher nutrient levels in your soil because there's almost always some soil moisture to move some nutrients around. You have to look at what's a normal amount of movement versus what's an abnormal amount of movement. So again, that's why we want data, and we want data quite often. Once a month, that's not cutting it. In my opinion, you're wasting your time. Do it every week. Trust me. Just try this every week. Do it for the next 3 or 4 years, at least in a couple of fields, and you will become a big believer in plant tissue sampling. I know we certainly are, and so are the high-yield farmers around the country.
Well, when you watch the guys that are really successful and are raising yields significantly higher than the county average wherever they're at, they're watching these nutrient needs all the way through to the end of the season, not stopping at, well, I'm at tassel, now I'm done. Or, oh, my soybeans are flowering, now I'm done. No, you're not. The game is just beginning on your farm. So don't give up. Keep working on your crop later in the season.
Now, we mentioned corn, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, a number of different crops. Same strategy, every single crop. We want some soil tests. We want to pull some plant tissue samples in the same spots where we've soil tested. And again, you don't have to do tissue samples all across the field in grid pattern or anything else. At least take a couple of spots in a field, but pick spots where you have grid soil sample data or zone soil sample data, so then we can kind of start to correlate those two things. And certainly you can add some nutrients during the season, but let's just keep in mind, nutrients like phosphorus and potassium don't move well in soil, whereas on the other hand, nutrients like nitrogen, sulfur, and boron move very well in soil. So those types of nutrients, yeah, you can add during the season, you get them to go down to the roots, no problem. But P and K, that's where you've got to build up the soil more for the long term and more ahead of the season.
It is really addictive once you start doing plant tissue tests in your field because you're going to get the data and now you can make decisions and not have to second guess yourself. You can say, wow, I have the data to support what's going on here. I have the data to understand why this area of my field is not yielding well. And to one of Brian's comments, you don't have to use the excuse, well, it didn't rain enough for me, or well, it wasn't this or it wasn't that with weather, things that you can't control. Let's focus on the things you can control because you can improve your yields.
One of those things you can control is weeds. If you get out there and scout and use the right herbicide, we'll talk about which ones to use coming up later in the show.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
With the success of the Case IH Steiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
We love the quality, we love the construction. We're looking forward to working with Morton in the future.
They have this down to a science. They know exactly what you want. They know how to make it happen. It's an easy process.
I would definitely recommend Morton. From the first time I met the salesman to the last nail that the crew put in, it has been a positive and professional experience.
I'm so happy I found Morton because they just make the job so easy.
Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
One of the biggest yield limiting factors on farms is even crop emergence, and only one closing wheel will get your growing season started right. Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheels from Copperhead Ag are proven to yield better than standard rubber tire and cast iron closing wheels in all conditions. With yield gains that give you a return on investment the first season, there's no reason to run a standard closing system again. Visit copperheadag.com today to get your 2017 growing season started right.
One of the things I heard from a lot of farmers last winter was, well, I don't know about going to Extend Beans. I can only spray dicamba up to R1. And I said, do you know what the Liberty label says? Do you know what the Roundup label says? With Liberty, it's the exact same restriction. And I get farmers that say, what? I've sprayed it in August before. Well, if you did, you were off label. Today we want to talk a little about spraying Liberty, Roundup, and dicamba on the appropriate soybeans.
Yes, it's a critical time of year when we're right towards the end of our spraying window. And you may think, well, my soybeans aren't even that big and I may have another flush come up later. That's why residual herbicides are so important. They have to carry you through the season. It's also why crop canopy is so important. So if you can get your crop to fill in and shade out the rows, oftentimes we don't have to fight weeds later on. But we do have one more shot at controlling weeds if you're at the proper stage. So let's talk about Liberty, for example. Brian mentioned R1, that's first bloom. So as soon as you start seeing flowers out in your field, you got to get going with that last Liberty application if you still have some weeds to get under control. Now, I'm not saying that Liberty is necessarily going to hurt your plants later on, but think about it this way. Just like when we used to spray a lot of Cobra, and I know there's still some Cobra being used today, we would look at, well, I don't want to stress the plant out once it's in the reproductive stages. That's what's going on here. We don't want to stress the plants out. Now, I've heard from farmers that have been spraying Liberty and just asked the question, well, what are you doing that's creating less stress? We've heard some guys talk about, well, I'm adding things like Mega Grow, for example. That helps. I'm trying to spray on days that aren't super hot when that plant might be stressed out, or I'm looking for a time after we get a rainfall so that plant is really growing actively and not all stressed out. I'm using a fungicide a week ahead to reduce stress on the plant. There's a lot of strategies people are doing. The point is, once you get to R1, get your spraying done, because after this point, you're not going to be able to anymore.
All right, so what Darren just talked about there, I'm all for reducing stress. But you know what the number one stress is in a lot of fields? Weeds. If you don't control the weeds and you don't control them quickly, you're going to have a major issue. So I don't care which product we're talking about here, they aren't labeled for late use. I personally don't think any of them are going to hurt the crop at R4, even R6, but they're just not labeled then. Could it be with residue studies, whatever? I don't know exactly the reason why. All I know is the label's the law. That's what we've got to follow. So Liberty says R1. That's first flower. Dicamba, Ingenia, XtendiMax, R1. Roundup is R2. So in other words, as soon as you see a pod in your field, you aren't supposed to be spraying any of those herbicides anymore. Okay, so again, like Darren said, we want residuals out there. Sure, dicamba has some residual. So if you switch to Xtend beans this year, and you might have said too, like I heard this just the other day, somebody was asking me again, well, I hear there are a lot of guys that aren't going to spray dicamba in their Xtend beans. I said, I don't think there's going to be a single guy out there, because everybody's going to have a few weeds and go, you know what? Dicamba's way better than Roundup. Dicamba's actually going to kill that weed. I'm going to spray it. I don't have any problem with these new formulations. They're great. Ingenia, XtendiMax, follow the label. They're awesome. I'm not worried about off-target movement. I'm not worried about anything. You're going to have great weed control. It's just that you got to spray early. You've got to spray by R1 so you're on label. And that's the main reason why we wanted to talk about this today.
Here's the last thing, weed size. If you don't get your spraying done now, if you have something like pigweed, for example, it's going to grow so fast that you're going to have a tough time bringing it down later anyway. So just get out there, get your spraying done when it's on label, and you'll have the best results.
Well, one of the weeds you might see out in your field is our Weed of the Week. We'll talk about how to control it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Weed of the Week is Field Sandbur.
This is one of those weeds that I really, truly dislike, because once you get later on in the season, you're going to have those actual burrs on the top of the plant. And I see it catching Pet's hair, I see it catching my shoelaces, on my pant leg. I don't like them at all. But the time to kill sandbur is not now when you've got big burrs. It's a little bit earlier in the season.
All right, well, here's why I like Field Sandbur, Darren. It's an annual weed. I think it's easy to control. It comes up late in the season, so if you have good crop canopy, there's no problem. And we have a wide variety of herbicides that will control it pretty easily and inexpensively. For example, in soybeans, you've got any of the grass killers, starting with clethodim, even Roundup, Liberty. They're all very good. I'm not too worried about any of those.
If you catch it small. Now, once it gets tillered out, once it gets big, it takes a pretty high rate of some of those grass killers.
Yeah, but why is that happening? Why is that happening? It shouldn't be happening. You've got to do your spraying earlier. This weed comes up late. So where we see this is usually when we've had hail, when you've had a drown out spot, when you've had some reason why your crop hasn't grown normally.
The other thing is lighter soils. We see lighter soils and drought-prone areas as being a spot where we get more Field Sandbur going in a field. And the other thing is just guys being overconfident. If you're out putting a pre-emerge herbicide on, and you say, well, I got a pre-emerge out for my grass, they're going to wear off before sandbur comes. It's a summer annual.
Some of the pre's aren't great on sandbur. For example, in corn, we've got Dual, Outlook, Harness, Surpass. They're just not great on sandbur. They help, but not perfect. So that's why you want Roundup or Liberty later on. Accent has some control if it's small. If you get to soybeans again, it's pretty easy. Start with a yellow, follow with almost any grass killer later. In wheat, we'd suggest starting with Prepare and follow later on with Axial.
Also in perennial grass crops, there are options out there, Pastora, Quinclorac, Plateau, and others. Check the labels on those products to see if they work for the type of grass that you're growing.
Well, that's it for our Weed of the Week, Field Sandbur, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Looking to maximize your yield potential? Monsanto BioAg can help with microbial seed applied solutions. Available for a wide variety of crops, they contain hard-working microbes that help your plants access key nutrients, enhance their root and shoot growth, and help them better withstand stress all season long, all of which add up to a higher yield potential for you. See how microbes can help you at monsantobioag.com/500trillion.
This agro-liquid line is something special. A lot of really impressive playmakers. Take a look at Sure K. This guy is an enigma.
But wrap your head around the exceptionally high plant response when compared to conventional potassium sources, the research-proven plant availability, plus flexible application options and mixing capabilities.
Really stellar performance stats. Sure K is a true standout, and that's a winning goal on any field.
Introducing the SOILMAX ZD48, the newest addition to the SOILMAX Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SOILMAX ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
You've got spraying to do, but there are bee colonies nearby. In today's Iron Talk, I'll share some ideas to stop insects in your fields without harming neighboring colonies. Almost anywhere I go, farmers and non-farmers alike ask me about bee health and bee safety. While it's true that insecticides could be used around the home or on the farm and they could hurt or kill bees, there are still steps that you can take to protect the bees in your fields from problem insects. First and foremost is communication. If you simply give notice that you're going to spray, the beekeeper has time to plan accordingly. That may mean moving the colony or simply covering the colony for a certain amount of time. While you're likely to know about colonies in your area, there are also online registries as well that you can check out. Spraying during flowering is always going to be a challenge as the bees are often working those flowers. However, if you spray later in the day or when the weather is cool, you can avoid them. Also, spraying fields before or after flowering, of course, works well, and this goes not only for the crop, but for the weeds as well. Rain or dew can also lead to insecticides staying on the leaf and flower surfaces longer, so avoid spraying when plants are wet. Product selection can make a huge difference as some insecticides have more residual activity and others have more of a quick knockdown. One particular callout is the neonicotinoid family. Since it doesn't kill bees quickly in many cases, they can carry it back to the hive. So to minimize or even avoid issues, save your neonics for seed treatment usage only. Finally, follow labeled directions and rates to minimize spray drift and other potential longer-term impacts. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Well, that's our time for today. We hope you've enjoyed our show. And during this coming week, we'd invite you to tune into the Ag PhD radio show if you're looking for more agronomic information. We're on SiriusXM channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central each weekday.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Did you realize that a healthy soil only contains about 50% dirt? In order for the soil microbes and plants to work together properly, soil should contain 25% air and 25% water. Today's farming practices are designed around maintaining that healthy balance. To learn more, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.